David Butler is an English teacher at North Morristown High School. He's married to Rachel, and their baby has just recovered from bronchitis. Rachel is concerned about their large hospital bills when Mr. Butler reassures her that he might soon get a well-paying English literature professorship at Dem University. The next morning in class, Mr. Butler is startled by a surprisingly punctual new student named Lucas Ward, who has just transferred from a school in San Francisco. Right off the bat, Lucas begins impressing Mr. Butler by handing in all the assignments he missed during the semester, heaping praise on him for his thought-provoking essay prompts, giving him a thoughtful gift, and showcasing his understanding of literature in class. Brought together by their shared interest in English literature, Lucas bonds with fellow student Becca over lunch on the school roof. Later that day, Mr. Butler is coaching the school's chess club when Lucas joins them. Mr. Butler chats with Lucas over a friendly game of chess. He learns that Lucas's dad is a criminal defense attorney, while his mother passed away a long time ago. Lucas is also determined to go to Harvard. By the end of this bonding session, Lucas checkmates Mr. Butler, literally and figuratively. The next morning, Lucas gets quite annoyed when his classmates Chris and Paige start whispering in the middle of English class while he's trying to concentrate and take notes. He confronts Chris about this and threatens him with twisted violence. In chess club, Mr. Butler announces the players for an upcoming chess tournament. Lucas is angered to hear that Mr. Butler put him as second seed behind Alex, a guy he had just defeated. During chemistry lab, Lucas decides to partner with his new chess rival, Alex. When Alex is looking at his specimen through the microscope, Lucas stealthily adds a chemical, causing an explosion that puts Alex out of school for the rest of the semester. When Mr. Butler talks to Lucas about the incident, he's more excited about being the first seed in the tournament, now that Alex was no longer in the picture. Back at home, Mr. Butler starts to grade Lucas's class assignment, which is the length of a full-blown dissertation. Lucas has a surprising take on Othello in his assignment, where he defends Iago, a villainous character, as being the only honest one in the play. Mr. Butler gives him a B+ on this assignment, and Lucas is clearly unhappy about it. So much so that he rudely mocks Mr. Butler's Iowa State degree by suggesting someone like him isn't qualified to assess his Ivy League work. Lucas starts stalking the Butler family. Next morning, Mr. Butler is astonished to discover that his car has a flat tire. He has to ride his bike to work, which makes him late to class. He tells his students that he was up all night finishing his professorship application. Becca is visibly upset upon knowing that Mr. Butler might be leaving next semester. Mr. Butler's troubles continue as he finds that none of the markers in his classroom are working. His lunch goes missing, so he has to eat at the cafeteria. And later, as he gets ready to post his personal essay to Dem University, he feels sick. Back up on the school roof with Becca, Lucas pretends to be great pals with Mr. Butler and tells her that he's having trouble with his wife. He goes on to say that Mr. Butler also has a romantic interest in Becca, who clearly has a crush on him too. He even offers to give her pointers to get Mr. Butler's attention. Next day, after class, Becca takes her chance to flirt with Mr. Butler, which makes him very uncomfortable. Luckily, they're interrupted by a call from Dem University's Miss Lohman, who wants to talk with Mr. Butler about his professorship application. However, Miss Lohman tells him that his application has been rejected because his personal essay portrayed him as a self-obsessed, arrogant prick. But this isn't what he wrote at all. He suspects Lucas had something to do with it. He picks up Lucas's class assignment from before and notices that Lucas's assignment and his own personal essay both used similar, advanced English vocabulary. This confirms his suspicion. The next day, Mr. Butler confronts Lucas, who blackmails him by saying that everyone would be happy if his academic record stayed spotless. A concerned Mr. Butler meets the school principal, Jane Fremont, to inquire about Lucas's previous record. He learns that Lucas has always gotten straight A's and was even the president of the chess club and many other clubs at his last high school. Mr. Butler tells Principal Fremont about how Lucas has been trying to extort an A out of him, but she doesn't believe him. Mr. Butler goes to see Lucas's dad and tells him about how his son tried to threaten him and may even have intentionally injured Alex. Mr. Ward isn't too happy about these accusations and orders Mr. Butler to leave, only he mistakenly calls him Mr. Garrett. This makes Mr. Butler call Lucas's old high school to inquire if a Mr. Garrett taught there. Mr. Garrett turns out to be Lucas's previous history teacher, who also had a devastating experience with him. Lucas blackmailed Mr. Garrett to get an A after he gave him a B on a paper in which Lucas defended Nazism. He hunted down Mr. Garrett's old high school friend, paid him to get the teacher to do drugs, and then filmed them doing the deed. Lucas receives his grades and discovers that Mr. Butler gave him an F. Infuriated by this, Lucas destroys his room. The next evening, Becca shows up in Mr. Butler's classroom when he's cleaning up after the chess club. She tries to flirt with him again, and this encounter was being recorded by a hidden camera. Mr. Butler is shocked at Becca's behavior and orders her to leave immediately. Lucas, who is watching the incident live on his phone, is frustrated when Mr. Butler doesn't fall into his trap. He invites Becca on the school roof, asks her not to give up, and manipulates her into writing a love letter addressed to Mr. Butler. The next morning, Mr. Butler is called into Principal Fremont's office, where a detective informs him that Becca had jumped off the school roof the night before. He shows Mr. Butler the letter that was found with Becca's body. Mr. Butler realizes that Lucas had something to do with Becca's death. Sure enough, Lucas pushed Becca off the roof after he had her write the love letter to implicate Mr. Butler. Mr. Butler tells the detective about Lucas. However, doubtful of Mr. Butler's innocence, Principal Fremont fires him. To add to his misery, his wife also refuses to see him. Lucas lies to the detective about how Becca and Mr. Butler were in love, and how Mr. Butler has had it out for him because he was close to Becca. He convinces the detective and Principal Fremont of his innocence by feigning grief. Meanwhile, Mr. Garrett, whose testimony against Lucas could have helped Mr. Butler's case, calls him to tell him that he didn't want to be dragged into this mess, especially if Lucas had video evidence against him. This makes Mr. Butler go to Lucas's house and search his room for evidence. Mr. Butler finally finds a camera with a recording of his encounter with Becca that fateful night. The next day, Lucas is summoned into the principal's office, where he finds Mr. Butler, the principal, and the detective waiting for him. They show Lucas the footage of him setting up the hidden camera in Mr. Butler's classroom and confront him about it. Principal Fremont ultimately expels Lucas from the school. Back at the Butler residence, Mr. Butler reconciles with his wife. He goes to take a shower when Lucas shows up. When Mr. Butler comes out looking for his wife, he's stunned to discover her dead body on the kitchen floor, with their baby missing. Lucas leaves a chess piece behind to get Mr. Butler to come find him at school. An anguished Mr. Butler drives to the school to find that Lucas has his baby. Lucas threatens to stab the baby with a pen if Mr. Butler tried to harm him. The angry teacher leaps at him, and they get into a scuffle. Lucas jabs Mr. Butler with his pen, while Mr. Butler chokes him with his hands. Finally, the detective shows up and arrests Lucas. The movie ends with Mr. Butler sadly walking away from the school with his baby in his arms.